Hi everyone and welcome to Leeds Dad's AskADad Facebook Live. I'm Erroll Murray from Leeds Dads and we support dads and families to engage with their preschool children. And during these sessions we talk about life under coronavirus, what it is, and how families can cope in the current situation. Our focus tonight is on going back to school. How safe is your child going back to school? Are you concerned about their learning environment, or do you urgently need them back in their normal routine? How do you think your child will react following your decision? With me tonight is Chris Dyson, head teacher at Parklands Primary School in Seacroft, who's delaying reopening due to a shortage of PPE. Councillor Jonathan Pryor, the executive member for learning skills and employment at Leeds City Council, and Ron Baptiste, a member of Leeds Dads, who has experience in the care and legal field. So if you have any questions, please get in touch, message us on facebook.com/Leeds Dads or on Twitter @Leeds Dads, and we'll do our best to answer. So coronavirus itself is a new flu-like virus that's been spreading around the world. It causes an illness called COVID-19, which has been declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization. That's the part of the United Nations that looks after the health and well-being of people around the world. Pandemic is a disease that is spreading in multiple countries around the world at the same time, which is what we're experiencing now. What we know at the moment is that most people get symptoms of a fever. A lot of people get a cough or a loss of sense of smell or taste. Some show no symptoms at all. So how do we prevent ourselves from catching the virus? It's all about social distancing, staying at least 2 meters from other people, and washing your hands. So tonight, our focus is going back to school. How safe is your child going back to school? Are you not concerned about their learning environment? Or do you urgently need your children back in their normal routine? The government wants all pupils in reception year 1 and year 6 to return to their classrooms with no more than 15 pupils per class. With me is Chris Dyson, head teacher at Parklands Primary in Seacroft, Councillor Jonathan Pryor, the executive member for learning skills and employment, Ron Baptiste, a member of Leeds Dads who has experience in the care and legal fields. So if you have any questions, please get in touch. Facebook.com/Leeds Dads or @Leeds Dads on Twitter, and we'll do our best to answer. Chris, thanks very much for coming on. Tell us a bit about the school. Tell us a bit about Parklands Primary, please.
Well, I'm the proud head teacher at Parklands Primary School up in Seacroft, one of the most deprived primary schools in Leeds and in the country. 6 years ago.
In the country?
In the country, 78% pupil premium, over 50% free school meals. But we don't use that as an excuse, because we are the single highest performing school in the country in maths over the last 4 years, and in the top 5% of schools in reading and writing. So it shows if you go into a school with big love, big respect and big dreams, you can achieve absolutely anything. When I took over, there were 150 exclusions, there was a padded cell, there were kids on the roof all the time.
What's a padded cell?
It's a cell for the naughtiest kids to go in, where they put in with all pads in there and they're locked in there.
So how would kids react in an environment like that?
Well, I had a big brother when I grew up, and there was nothing more frustrating than them sort of pinning you down and having boisterous fun and things. And it's saying when you get these kids put in this room, they're isolated, they can't get out, it's claustrophobic. And you've got to remember that these aren't high school children, these are 4 to 11 year olds and things. So it's rather barbaric for me. So there's two choices how to change a school. You can either go in with a stick, and this is the way we do it, and these are the hard rules. So if you wear black socks, you're excluded. Sorry, if you don't wear black socks, you're excluded. If your shoes aren't black, you're excluded. If you forget your planner, you're in an isolation room. So, but I went the other way. I built it on love and respect, playing music 24/7 in my school, band shouting, and the results are there to see. It's now the Fun Day Friday at the Fun Palace, where I get 140 parents in to an assembly to see and celebrate all the brilliant work these fantastic kids have done.
That's amazing.
Well, if we fast forward 6 years now, we've gone from being inadequate to outstanding school, which is really rare for a school of our demographics to get an outstanding standard. But as we chat tonight, it's all been built on well-being for staff and for children.
It's all. Is that what you see as the key that's made your school what it is today? The
Well,
focus on well-being.
you've got to put your heart and soul into the school. When I first got there, my first Christmas, it devastated me to see that nobody had been to see Santa. You know, and as a parent with 3 kids myself, you get bored in December because you've already been to see Santa 4 or 5 times. You're queuing up for an hour or so. So on Christmas Eve, we open up our school. We do 800 Christmas dinners for the community. We have real life reindeers outside. We've got Santa. We've got unicorns in the hall. And the community love this because it gives them a sense of well-being. It gives them a sense of sort of pride in things. Staff well-being is everything. So much so I haven't spent a penny on supply teachers in the last 5 years because none of my staff are ever off poorly, because I give well-being days out left, right and centre for going above and beyond. So looking after every single part of your community is everything. And it's significant that last Friday I gave out the 50,000th, and that's not a mishearing, my 50,000th meal in 10 weeks. 2 weeks before, I'd give out 35,000 meals in 3 hours that I got delivered from McCain's. So it wasn't just my school that benefited. We had 80 vans delivering all over Leeds, all over Bradford for the Leeds Crisis Food Bank and things. So, you know, if you put that heart and soul in the community, see you put that heart and soul in, they'll do absolutely anything for you.
50,000 meals in 10 weeks.
Although, as I said, it was 35,000 in one day. But the result of that, if now they want to do a repeat, they want to give me another 30. McCain's want to send me another 35,000 bags of frozen goods. And I've got lovely Whitby Scampi. I do love a bit of Whitby Scampi. They're giving me 10,000 bags of sort of Whitby Scampi. So as soon as the freezer levels have dropped, then we'll be going on round 2. So obviously I'll be involving Leeds Dads in that, because I know what a great job you do for the community with your food banks and things. So
thanks very much. So what about how you've adapted? How have you adapted to the new coronavirus situation? Yeah.
Well, I'll be totally honest.
Pupils.
I'll be totally honest, as soon as Ireland shut down, which was the previous Tuesday before we closed, my panic then was, my priority was to get food into kids' tummies and things. And I thought, I don't know what way the DFE is going to go, but eventually printing out a piece of paper for parents when only 18% have got emails is a real absolute struggle, because nobody can use them. You get the heartbreaking stories of these children, parents who are queuing up in Asda, they hand the voucher over, and it's not working. It was a very middle-class system, and I wanted to stay well clear of it. So I worked with Leeds City Council, we're in Area 5, and we worked together knowing that we wanted to produce food hampers. We adapted that slightly because we were doing 200 food hampers a day, but then we suddenly thought we've got a lot of traffic coming onto site there, so we'll do 200 weekly sort of food hampers. And by linking up with Adam Smith at the Real Junk Food Project and the Magic Breakfast, who have been brilliant, it now means that we're sending home 2 hampers a week, including Fun Day Freezer Friday. And it basically means that the parents in my community are getting £60 worth of food every single week per child that's on a free school meal, as opposed to a voucher that was never going to work in areas like ours.
So this is right across the community, not just the pupils.
So all across the community. If I know that I've got families that are on the sort of borderline that aren't free school meals, they get a hamper as well. I don't mind taking a hit on that because my job in the community doesn't stop at 3:10 when school closes. It doesn't shut on holiday times. It keeps going all the time. And because of the sort of supply chain that I've got up, we're one of the few schools that are actually open during the 6 weeks holiday to give experiences and food out 3 times a week. This was just an extension of what we do in the summer. But it's the national businesses that have really got on board. But as I said, you can't underestimate what Child Leeds did with the making sure kitchens and areas got open to make sure the food was coming out. And to be fair, Leeds, for me, have led, the DFE have been atrocious in my book, but Leeds City Council and the Education Department in particular have been absolute market leaders in absolutely everything they've done, from the food and to what Jonathan will say in a minute about how Leeds haven't just gone like Liverpool where nobody's opening. They haven't gone like some multi-academy trusts and free schools that are in the DFE's pocket saying we're opening everything. It's been given to the school governors on a school basis, and it's sort of been encouraged to trial something like Year 6 to see how that goes for 10 days, get procedures in place before opening up further down the line for the younger ones.
So, so as in the school holidays when you're open, were you open for the last 10 weeks, the last 8 weeks?
I've not missed a day at school since February half term. You know, I've learned new skills. I've not felt drained or anything because the new skill. I always loved Only Fools and Horses and Minder when I grow up. So I'm a bit of a mixture at the moment between Arthur Daly and Del Boy, just getting this food in. And for me, it's raised my well-being, knowing how happy my parents are. You know, I managed to upset Caroline Malone, one of the right-wing Express journalists, who picked the wrong school on to criticise my school, calling them lazy and things. But we've done lots of online learning. But again, I've only got 18% of my pupils with laptops. So as well as providing online learning, we provided lots of paper homework, reading books, absolutely the best homework you can have during this period and things. So I've got the happiest parents, I've got the happiest staff, because I've not taken sort of DFE guidance. Anybody that I sent home pre-lockdown for asthma, being pregnant, having vulnerable parents or vulnerable children in your household, those guys stay at home until September.
And have you had children actually coming into class, vulnerable or key workers?
Vulnerable and my sort of NHS key workers. So we've been running around about 15 children. As I said, we should have opened up this Monday for year 6. But parents haven't got the trust in the government yet. For example, in year 6, I only had 9 children out of 46 that want to return. In year 1, who were due back on the 15th, but that's now back to the 22nd. I had nobody out of 60 that wanted to send the children back. And in reception, I only had 1 out of 46 that wanted to send the children back. So at this very moment in time, the confidence, it's gone too soon. I think we should have all just took a step back and thought, right, there's nothing wrong with having an aspirational target. When I started Parklands, I told all the kids and all the staff, within 4 years, I'd make it the best school in the country. They all laughed their head off. And I did it in 2 and things. So there's nothing wrong with having an aspirational target. But I think sometimes you've got to step back and think, this track and trace isn't running yet. Why don't we make another decision June the 15th with a view to probably being 1st of July?
Let's see how this is turning out. You're listening and watching AskADad Leeds Dad's Facebook Live. Our focus tonight is going back to school. How safe is your child going back to school? How do you think your child will react following your decision? Government wants all pupils in reception year 1 and year 6 to return to their classrooms with no more than 15 pupils per class. It's already begun. With me tonight is Chris Dyson, head teacher at Parklands Primary in Seacroft, Councillor Jonathan Pryor, and Ron Batiste, a member of Leeds Dads who has experience in the care and legal fields. So if you have a question, please get in touch. Messages on facebook.com/Leeds Dads or at Leeds Dads on Twitter, and we'll do our best to answer. Councillor Jonathan Pryor, you're the executive member for Learning Skills and Employment. Leeds City Council says it's going to leave the decision of whether to restart lessons to individual schools, adding that you won't expect every school to open from day 1 as the lockdown measures ease. What was day 1 like? What was it like yesterday?
So some schools began to open their doors. I think very few schools opened to as much as the government wanted, which was kind of to reception year 1 and year 6. I think for us, what we did when the Prime Minister announced that he wanted schools to go back, we'd already held 1 Zoom call with over 200 head teachers, and we gave some thought to what position we would take as a local authority. My first instinct was this was a massive ask of schools. This was potentially too soon and too much too soon.
Why too soon? Why too soon?
I think when you compare us to other countries, we are starting to go on the curve down with new corona cases, but we're not as far down as some other countries were when they began the same thing. And look, I think head teachers have been thinking about how they reopen schools ever since the day the schools closed. But I think what the government kind of did was just apply a one-size-fits-all approach. They just chose an arbitrary date and said, this is when we're opening. And actually, when you looked at schools, there's so many differences. Every school's got a different number of children, different cohorts of children with different needs. Every school has got different numbers of teachers who may be shielding because they've got pre-existing conditions, or their partner or someone they live with has got pre-existing conditions. Every school's got a different layout. There's kind of one example I've been using everywhere of two schools quite near each other. One which has got from every classroom has got a door that goes outside and lots of room around it, so the 15 children in the class can all queue outside and go in. Then there's another school just down the road where there's one door to get into the school, and the school's on a main busy road, which means you'd have the entire school queuing, trying to socially distance queue along a massive
down the
road.
main road.
Yeah, and it just showed that there wasn't one solution for schools, and that actually, we've got about 280 schools in Leeds. Those are 280 leaders who know their schools better than anyone. So what we did as local authority, we chose to give political cover to those schools who wanted to delay opening. We worked with every school to go through their individual risk assessment to work out what was best for them. And a lot of schools have come back where they are keen to open because they know some of the risk and the lasting damage that is going to happen to kids if they're out of school for too long. But schools want to come back safely, and that was at the key of everything. So we basically said to schools, take baby steps, make a small change, get comfortable with that, make another small change, get comfortable with that, rather than just opening the doors and letting everyone back at once.
So why don't you get all schools to take the same baby steps at exactly the same time? And if you were setting the tones, all parents would get an equal chance to return their children to school at the same time.
I think because there are just so many differences in schools. There may be one school where they've got one member of staff who can't come into school because they're shielding. You might have another school where half the members of staff are shielding. And that means that the ability of those schools to reopen is going to be completely different. So I think that's why it was important to treat schools as individuals. One of the factors we did discuss was this would mean that the offer for different parents in Leeds would be slightly different and would evolve over time. But we're just asking that parents are patient and kind of trust the schools to do what's safe. It is going to be difficult, but this was the point the whole way through, that it was best for schools to do it, because we said the government had just chosen an arbitrary date of June the 1st. We did discuss maybe having a date for Leeds, maybe about 2 weeks after then, but then that just felt like an arbitrary date as well, because there are some schools that could do bits before then. There are some schools that won't even be ready by mid-June. And the more we looked into it, the more a one-size-fits-all approach just didn't work.
I see. The science is what we've been told that we should be following, and up to probably Friday, we were told everything was right. That the date wasn't as arbitrary as you're making it sound. But since Friday, the Independent Scientific Advisory Group, IceAge, sounds like a film, have been saying that they've changed their mind. Were you following their advice all the way through, or were you countering it? How were you able to make decisions?
So we made decisions with the advice of, we have our own public health advisor here in Leeds. So public health across the country, there's a public health officer for every council. So we always did it in consultation with her. And it's important to remember as well that schools haven't closed over the past 2 months. Schools have been open for vulnerable children, for children of key workers. And actually what we're talking about is expanding that opening. So if a primary school has kind of 10 children in it now, then the next step is to go up to maybe 15 children, for a few days, and then go to 20 children. And we felt kind of like a slow and steady approach was the safest way.
Okay.
And, I just want to come in with a question here to both Jonathan and Chris. See who we've got. Somebody who's put a question in. It's from somebody called David Smythe. He reports from Denmark. Over the weekend, they reopened their daycare and schools for kids aged 2 to 12 in mid-April. and confirmed that doing so has not led to an increase in infections. What's your views on that? Do you think the same could work for the primary schools over here?
Who knows? Like, I'm not an expert on viral diseases. Neither are a lot of people, and that's one example of where things have gone really well in another country. There are examples where things have been a complete disaster in others, and I think that's why we took a really cautious approach, knowing that children have to come back to school, but taking a cautious approach of slow and steady, so we could go backwards if necessary. And kind of not biting off more than we could chew. I don't know how you feel about that, Chris.
I was just having a look see about the figures from Denmark, but I mean, the difference between Denmark and the UK is just drastically different at the moment. The news tonight, we've had another 324 deaths today. You know, we can't underestimate that. Another 324 deaths, which puts us up at 37,000. We're not like Germany, who managed this from the start by, but a lot more proactive at the start. I think so. I don't like making a lot of comparisons with Denmark. But funny, just before we came on, I just jotted down this that just popped up on the BBC website, that a school in Derby last week had one member of staff out of 11 that come down with symptoms of COVID-19, and they've tested all the staff, and 7 out of the 11 of those staff have now got COVID-19. So basically, if one person gets it, everyone's going to get it in that school environment, and we're not in a position yet. In my until we've got track and trace for them, the Germans had it down to a T. You know, we rushed it forward. Oh, we're releasing it Thursday. It crashed after 10 minutes. It crashed after 10 minutes again. You know, we've got to get track and trace in place. Andy Burnham on Sky News on Sunday came out with a great point saying the government and the medical experts know what the regional R rate is, and they're just not releasing it. You know, what we've got with the Whitehall Wombles, as I call the DFE, you know, they're in this bubble themselves in London, and whatever happens in London is the same all around the country.
Yeah.
But we're 2 weeks behind London. And although London's dropped to 0.4 R rate now, there's some of the schools, Yorkshire's one, and the North East is even worse, although we're under the same umbrella, where the R rate is still around about 1. And what really breaks my heart is this weekend, we saw lots of footage in Bournemouth with the people diving off the rocks. Oh, God. You know, and the beach is packed, but it was the same in Ilkley, it was the same in Whitby, Bridlington, Starkey. Because of Dominic Cummings and everyone can do what they like now, it's like this has never existed, and everyone's, we're all off to the seaside now. And that R rate is inevitably going to rise. Yeah.
We've had quite a few questions coming in. Lindsay from Mum's Space, Mum's Group, her group's given a couple of points. Are children expected to social distance at all times at school, even when playing outdoors?
I've come down a different line with this, and when I had the brilliant Paul Dean from Leeds City Council, and you know what Leeds City Council have done for schools, as I said, I can't speak highly enough. They've been absolutely amazing. And when Jonathan says that the risk assessments for all Leeds schools have been looked at by experts, you've got to believe them, because I even had Paul Dean, one of the people, to come round and sort of have a walkthrough and see what we were doing in our school. And when we talked about outside play, I'm buying lots of rubber gloves so the children can go out and play out. They can play on their equipment. They can play with the basketballs, knowing that when they come in, those gloves come off and they're straight in the bin. Because we've got to make sure these children that are coming back in, as well as looking at the well-being and everything, we've got to make sure we're not just going back to the isolation booth situation where you sit in this seat and you don't move from it all day. And it's slightly easy with the older ones, because the older one knows this is their pen, you know, this is their calculator and things, whatever. And therefore they can sort of self-wipe down when they've done. But the 4 and 5-year-olds, there's absolutely no way.
So what's going to happen? Will she's asked another question. Will children in reception in year 1 be told off if they repeatedly go near each other? This is heartbreaking stuff.
Oh, and you imagine being a little child, you know, that's told off for hugging and things, or if they have a fall down the floor and they've cut the knee open, it's like, no, you can't have any hugs and things. Just sit on that bench. I'll go and put my PPE things on my gloves, and I'll come and put a plaster on. It's going to be terrifying and petrifying for these children. And I said, we all want to get back. This is the job, you know, that I love more than anything else in the world. And my corridors are full of love. They're full of excitement. They're full of, you know, learning. And the fact we're shut is really upsetting. But I think if we'd have been more realistic and thought July, then we'd see what happens over the next 4 weeks and things.
So how can you keep the children apart? What can you do with the younger ones?
I think this is why a lot of schools are taking the approach to let year 6 in first, and almost kind of see how things go with year 6, because as Chris says, they are an age group who will understand what's going on a bit better than kind of 4 or 5 year olds. Then hopefully in a few weeks' time, if then's kind of the time when reception in year 1 are coming back, then hopefully the R rate will have reduced even further. Because as Chris says, it's near impossible to get 4-year-olds to socially distance. So you kind of want those to be coming back once the R rate has reduced a bit more. It is a massive challenge. And I think that's why we wanted to work with heads to kind of work with their risk assessments, because they know the children better than kind of, officers and Whitehall do sat in offices somewhere. That's why we just think we need to trust heads and trust their judgment.
The idea of the gloves for the older children, that really allows them to interact a little more. Is that something you're going to promote across the city, or is it something you can enable other schools to do, Jonathan?
Plenty of schools have come to us with requests for odd bits of PPE and odd other bits of equipment. I know that a lot of nurseries aren't in my portfolio, but I know that in a lot of the nurseries they've gone through and kind of taken out toys that would be passed around a lot more and put more toys in that would be kind of for more individual play, and there has been a lot of that thought, and we have helped give a lot of advice as a council for that. So yeah, we're always open to schools coming to us for stuff like that.
Okay.
We were sort of told by Paul Dean, which was great, which is get
you
yourself.
Have to tell us who Paul Dean is. You've talked about him so much. He's clearly a wonderful guy.
So he's sort of in charge of like risk assessments and all things like that in the authority and things. So he's a senior sort of guy that filters information down. So, but basically when he came in, he suggested having, for reception year 1, having 3 different boxes that's got Lego in, it's got all the sort of toys in. And then every 2 days, you take that box out and then you put another box in so you can be cleaning these other boxes. So, because again, for year 6s, they can look at something visual on the sort of smart board. They can do a bit of writing. They can do some creative arts. But for the reception, and we haven't even talked about nursery yet, but for the reception and year 1 children, they're still doing a lot of play-based learning, and they're not used to sitting down on a desk and just having the pen all day and things. So.
Another point that's been put forward is about now people are expected back to work. Is there anything schools can do to support working parents? So what if you're not a key worker, but you do have to go to work, and you've got your children and they're not in obviously year 6, year 1? Is there anything that schools can do?
Well, as I said at the start, I mean, Gavin Williamson is now the champion and the hero of disadvantaged children, because he's the one that's making sure that the militant teachers aren't keeping these children away. But with a bit of hindsight, instead of saying we're opening for reception year 1 and year 6, we should have said we're opening up for the disadvantaged children across all the year groups and things. So that's something different, because don't forget, it was Gavin Williamson that is the hero now. He couldn't even feed the kids. He couldn't feed the kids 4 weeks ago. They give a contract out to Eden Red, which, they'll celebrate that 96% of these children got these vouchers. But there's 4% that didn't. And 4% equates to 233,000 families that did not get the basic food that Leeds are doing, that lots of heads around the country were sorting out their own sort of vouchers and their own food systems. And again, it's just been mismanagement from the DfE from the very start to the bottom. And if I was Ofsted, I'd get straight in there and I'd get some changes.
So how did Leeds support those children, those families?
Because Leeds, before the sort of voucher came out, schools could negotiate. Schools could go down the Wander route, which is another voucher system, which didn't have suddenly everybody have to use this same system. So schools in that first 3 weeks, I think it took about 3 weeks for the voucher system to come out, and schools were working either through Wander But we were blessed in City of Leeds that we had a cater. If you was with Leeds City Council catering, they'd give you options of having food hampers, vouchers, weekly hampers, hot food for children in school, and it was absolutely a breath of fresh air.
And actually, one thing we were able to do that through kind of the council's in-house service was, it's less of an issue for primary school kids, but we were able to do things like send kind of tampons and sanitary products to older kids. We were able to send even stuff like toothpaste, which some families didn't have. And we were really able to just get to as many people as possible and just get things to people that they needed, because of course kind of their education was vital and schools were looking after that. But so many people have so much more basic needs that just weren't being met. And we were able to use the council system to get through to so many people.
One of the areas that Leeds Dads had to evolve into is the food parcels, providing food for different families across the city. And we've been asked so many times for sanitary products, soap, water, shower gel, shampoo, and we've been able to signpost to redirect, but it's made it very clear that the needs are there. And
absolutely, and it's heartbreaking when you realise that people need the most basic things. And if you do have anyone who comes forward and you don't know who to provide, do just drop me an email, and I can always find out and sort things out for people.
Great.
Just wanted to jump in here. There's a comment from Lisa Jones to you, Chris. Well done, Chris. Clap. Love them back to life in terms of what you're doing for the children, how you've turned the school around, and you look after your staff too. She asks, where do I sign up? And hi, Erroll. 2 local schools in Bradford have had to shelve plans to reopen due to COVID-19 cases being reported. My son in reception is due to go back on Monday, 21st of June, but neither me or mum feel comfortable sending him and are adamant that we won't send him. Will we be fined for non-attendance? So some parents out there are probably worried about how this is going to go in terms of fines or whether they'll get a knock on the door.
Sure. So before the crisis hit, school attendance was already down to kind of 50-60%. A lot of places, parents voted with us to move, and we were one of the first local authorities to just cancel fines and just say we are not fining at the moment, because if people aren't sending their kids in because they're going on holiday, that's completely different to not sending kids in because they do not feel safe. And we've said that now schools are starting to reopen, there will be absolutely no fining at all. This was something which a number of councils went to the government to and said, we are not fining people if they're not sending their kids in. And eventually the government announced nationally that they wouldn't. Because actually, fining for non-attendance is something councils are legally obliged to do. And if it's something the council doesn't do, the government can sanction the council. So it actually took a few councils to try and push the government to change their mind on that.
Is this recently? Is this recently, that decision?
It was a couple of weeks ago, and I can't say when it'll change, but I can't imagine. It's definitely not coming back in before September, and who knows from September, because we don't know where we'll be as a country then.
I mean, I'm in the same boat as Ron, who we were chatting before we came live.
Yes.
Right. I mean, my own children, I've got 2 children that could go back from yesterday. I'm not sending mine back yet. I want to send them back, and hopefully in beginning of July, I can reassess the sort of situation and things. So, but it's very moment in time as a parent myself, I don't want to put the risk. I'm not one of these people that have been piling down to the seaside as soon as it gets hot.
Yes.
I look after myself in school every day. I've kept on, and my family's kept on real stringent lockdown. Because we don't know what's going to sort of happen yet. But no, it's, for all the parents out there, there's no fines, and it's parent choice. If you don't want to send your child in, I think I read on the DfE guidance today, it says if your child's not coming in, you're supposed to ring up and just say, my child's not attending, and therefore it's not a child protection sort of safeguarding issue. But if you are on the vulnerable list and you are a child protection sort of child, which we need to make sure safe, then by dropping off these food parcels twice a week, ticks all the boxes, because we're getting to see these children.
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely. We'd always encourage parents to keep in touch with their schools, but in the same way that head teachers know their schools best. We know that parents know their kids best as well. So it is just about trusting people.
Yeah, and then you have the parents. Got a comment here from CJ, and he says, on the school front, it's tricky. There are the obvious risks of sending, your children back, but we've had a lot of tricky behavior as a result of it all. I think they're speaking about their own child. There has to be a balance. If we wait for it to be 100% safe, the impact on mental health will be massive. So there are parents in this double bind where, those who don't want to send back because of the physical health of catching COVID-19, as it were. But then there's the others who say, well, look, how do we draw the line between the health? How do we strike the balance where we're not going to get rid of this risk 100%? Do we just bite the bullet and try and get kids in as soon as possible?
I think that's why we're talking with schools to gradually increase the number of kids they're taking, but just to take it slowly and safely, rather than just taking a blanket, no, we're not opening across the board. Because you're absolutely right, some of the mental health issues that are affecting young people, this is a hugely formative time for a lot of young people, and being taken away from their peers is going to be massive. Schools do need to come back. It just has to be done safely and steadily. That's what's fed the approach we've taken.
Yeah. So there's a question that's come in for, actually, we shouldn't overlook the point that, was it Lisa, you just mentioned, Ron, said about Bradford that was about to open.
Yes,
Isn't
Bradford.
able to.
Yes, and then mentioned about the fines. Yeah.
The fact that they were about to open, but they've had a breakout.
Sorry.
They've had a breakout of COVID.
Yes, a breakout, sorry, yes. Yeah,
what happens if the schools? What happens if there's a case of COVID coming through?
So I know what a lot of schools are doing are having. My sister's a primary school teacher, so I'll talk about what they're doing at her school. They're splitting the classes up into groups of 15, and each 15 will have one teacher. And those 15 kids with the one teacher will learn together. They will have playtime together. They will eat together. They'll be in one unit. If there was a breakout within that unit, then all 15 children and the teacher would then have to isolate for 2 weeks, but that unit wouldn't have been in touch with the other blocks. So across, it's a 2-form entry school, so there are 60 kids, so that's 4 blocks. So if there's a breakout in one of them, they will isolate, but they won't have been in contact with the other 3. And that's kind of one way of trying to mitigate a wider spread. And I know schools have got a lot of schools have got similar models. Not every school's doing exactly the same thing because they're bound by the layout of the school or what teaching staff they've got available. But I know a lot of schools are going down a similar model of kind of having almost bubbles of pupils and staff.
A question's come in for Mr. Dyson from Adam Smith. How are you able to make autonomous decisions for the benefit of your pupils and parents, whereas other schools seem restricted or reluctant to do so? Maybe we shouldn't say this in front of Jonathan, just in case there's something that you're doing that you shouldn't.
No, just having the trust of the community, giving your life and soul to the community over the last 6 years. My school know that, when I finish at home time, when it's holiday time, I don't just shoot off home and get back to my own little house and things. They know they're always in my sort of thoughts all the way through. And it's having the confidence. And when you've got an outstanding school, and when I say outstanding, that's a flick of a coin, because a good school and things, you've got to have the support of your chair of governors, you've got to have the support of the authority and things. And by going through the right channels and bringing out your concerns to the chair of governors, the governors, because they're the ones that are really responsible if anything does go wrong and you open. And it's just about all working together as a team, as it were. So,
okay.
And I think, every head teacher is a leader. It's their job to run and look after that school, and Chris does an incredible job at Parklands. And as a local authority, it's not our job to run everything centrally. It's our job to support people like Chris and to help make his job easier, help him take care and educate his cohort of children.
I mean, my only worry is when you've got we're lucky enough in Leeds that the majority of primary schools are still local authority run schools, but we still have some primary schools that have gone into the academy chains, And when you're looking at a big academy chain that might have schools in Leeds, Nottingham, Sheffield, you know, all around, and you've got a CEO making a blanket decision, that's where the worry comes. Because if the CEOs are not who's making the decision,
They're not on the ground.
We'll stay in with the DFE, you know, we're a free school, we need all this DFE support, we've been told we've got to open. But these CEOs who are not, who are making these decisions are not the people who are in working with the reception and the year one children. These are the people sat at home, working from home still, who are just basically like Blackadder goes forth, call comes in, right, send them over the top, and you know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Lizzie has asked, Jonathan, will children who need extra support in class still be able to get that if teachers cannot interact with pupils?
I guess it depends on the nature of the needs of the children. Obviously, children have a variety of needs. Kids with ECHPs, you know, that can mean hundreds of different things. We want to make sure that those are the priority. Those vulnerable children are the first ones who come back, of course, because they're the ones who are probably suffering most from being at home. There are going to be some changes, I'm sure, in a lot of schools because of PPE that might be necessary, but we are working to make sure that they're a priority. Okay,
so would that involve, like, say, 2 teachers in a classroom? Are we going to see 1 teacher and 1 teaching assistant in a classroom with 15 pupils? Is that the model?
That's one model in one school. I know that different schools are doing different things. Some schools which do have more access to more staff are doing kind of two teachers per 15 children. Some schools just can't do that because of a number of staff shielding. Obviously, if pupils do have that one-to-one support as part of their ECHP, then hopefully that's still happening. It is a massive picture, and if there is an individual case that I don't know who this question has come from, if there's an individual concern, I'm more than happy to take it away and speak to officers about it and come back with an answer, because
I'll tell Lizzie.
Sure.
I mean, I've certainly gone down the two members of staff per bubble kind of route, but that's only because, one, I've got I'm lucky enough, I've got 63 members of staff in school and things, so that's easy for me. But some smaller schools, you might only have a staff of 14, 15. So, and one of the reasons I've gone for the 2 is that to have a teacher with the same children, lesson time, break time, lunch time, and then carrying on learning means the teacher's well-being is not going to be the best because they're not having that just half an hour now time. And more significantly, if a child goes to the toilet, I'm going to get the teaching assistant to take them to the toilet so they can sort of wipe down the handles, wipe down the taps and things after. Because, you know, when we're looking at the rate of infection, and if one person in the bubble gets it, the bubble and the teacher goes home for 2 weeks, but what have these children touched? They might not have been in the other bubble, but, you know, opening a door, opening the toilet, putting their hands on the dining table. If that surface is not cleaned properly, that germ is staying there and things. Well, so I mean, we're just doing the very best as we can at the moment. But again, we're lucky that we've got Leeds behind us because, as I said, the DFE, 48 pages of guidance we were sent last week. 48 pages of guidance from the DFE.
What were you expecting?
Not 48 different pieces and things. But it's funny today because the DFE put out guidance today about saying early year settings and reception don't need public liability insurance. That came from the DFE. Then about 2 hours later, Ofsted had to reply back to that DFE message saying, whoa, Ofsted requirements, you've got to have public liability in place and things. So that's what I mean. The DFE are just flooding. They're flooding without thinking. The amount of changes that they've made to the guidance is just making head teachers' well-being, you know, it's too much, and it's just being sort of vomited onto you for you to decipher and things. So
that's just difficult.
Just wanted to ask you a question, Chris. In terms of the curriculum, what's happening with that?
Now, a great question, because I'm not worried at all about children catching up. Okay, right. And I appreciate that children have been out of school now for 12 weeks, and it could end up being 18 weeks. But for teachers and the people who are in the schools every day, Back in 2015, when the new curriculum came out and it was totally revamped, the work that year 5 children were doing, for example, in maths, moved down to year 3.
Okay.
So basically, what they're doing to close that gap from the year 3 things that they've not done, and all the year 4 curriculum. And children are very resilient. They've got minds like sponges, you know, and the children just want to be back. And when they're back and they're happy and they learn again, those gaps will naturally get filled and things. It's been great seeing the online learning for the children to do, but a case where my school is, and when I sort of reviewed it, we've only got 18% of the school with a laptop and things. So online learning, the internet connections, and I hope one good thing that comes out of this is that more deprived areas, your Hare Hills and your Seacrofts and things, will be given free, fast, land speed. You know, and looking at my parents also, most of the children, and if there's 4 or 5 children in the family, they're doing the work on a mobile phone.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
So it was vital to give sort of non-electronic sort of homework to keep the minds ticking over. But believe me, when these children come back, they're going to be so glad to be back. They're going to be, you know, eager just to be back learning and back being with their friends and, you know.
So parents don't need to worry about their children catch up, because you'll have parents who will be worried about the attainment of their children. And what could parents do at home with their children? What's one piece of advice you would give to parents over this period, what they could do?
Well, Ron, that's a great point. And that's why it was sort of essential that the year groups that went back first was year 10 and year 12. They've got GCSEs and they've got A-levels, exams that change their lives forever. In primary schools, we've got reception baseline, year 1 phonics test, year 2 rock phonics reset test, year 2 SATs test, year 4 times check, year 6. We're just a machine of exams, and hopefully that will be sort of stopped. But what the parents can do, because you've got to remember that parents are not teachers.
They're not, no.
Even if you're in a lovely middle class area with a lovely accountant as parents, there's a difference between being a brilliant accountant and being a teacher and things.
That's right.
But reading is a gateway to everywhere. It stems the imagination. Read a book, read the next chapter. Little simple things like that, you know. And parents are never, ever, ever going to have this amount of time with all their children again. And again, in an estate like mine, you might have a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 16-year-old. So it's making sure that these people can be doing things together as a sort of family and learning sort of new skills and things.
So you're saying that homeschooling seems to be working. They're getting support. You're saying online is fine, but they're getting, your pupils are getting the paper versions as well. And you doesn't sound like you're too concerned about children not being able to learn as well as say other pupils from more affluent homes, where they will have the Wi-Fi, they will have the computers, and they will have parents who may have more time to do that and are able to do that. How can you balance that?
Well, I mean, I'm lucky because my children here in the house have all got a laptop. They've all got pretty quick internet speed, so they can access all that sort of learning. But obviously, not everybody's as lucky as we are. But as I said, if we go back to 2015, it shows we had basically 2.5 years to put into a year to play that catch up, and we did it. You know, and that's something that a lot of non-teachers don't realise, that the children have benefited from that, closing the gap. They benefited from that new curriculum and the new way of learning, and they rose to the challenge, and that's why the results are going up and up and up every single year now.
Wow.
There are lots of areas that we want to go into, but we've had lots of questions. We're going to try and blitz through them. Do you want to start off, Ron?
Oh, yeah. There's some comments. I know that DR put sort of stuff to do with psychological health outweighs physical health, as psychological health outweighs physical health as far as we are concerned. Our eldest is really struggling. She misses her friends, her routine, her teacher, and her learning. So that's a point that one parent is making about, you know, emotional health versus, you know, going back to school, friends, missing out on school, as it were. There are, I've done that point already. Here's one from Mikey. I am glad we didn't have to make the decision, although we did get asked our opinion by school. I really feel my daughter needs to speak to other kids and do school stuff, as I'm struggling to really imagine a world where she is a flying horse, as it were. So yeah, so there are parents who are sort of like for and against sending children to school. Parents are quite anxious, but from what I've heard from you, Chris, is that children want to get back. They're pretty resilient. They're getting stuck in. Has there been any issues around children's probably their emotional health, and how would your school support children through that? And what sort of message could you give to parents and to maybe other schools, a model in terms of how other schools should really support children who are struggling? Because there's a lot of schools, you know, I've sent my children back, and you know, I have one in reception, and I think there's only about 4 of them in his class. I've got one, my other child is in year 2, and as you know, the year 2s are not all back. It's just receptions, year 1s and year 6s. So he's not seeing his friends or whatever. So how would the school work with children like that and make sure that they're not that anxious, even though they may be resilient? There would also be that worry. They would notice the difference.
So we've got to get away from the non-stop exam factory that we've created in primary over the last few years, and make no bones about it. Let's say we're back in September, and touch wood, we are. We've got to make sure that September and October is about well-being. It's about understanding. Yeah. It's all right for adults, because we're adults. We know how anxious some people are feeling about this. We know how worried some people are feeling. But what we don't know is how this has affected the children. The first 2 weeks of lockdown, the best time ever, no school, the honeymoon period, the sun was shining outside. But we knew that honeymoon period had stopped. And now we're into week 12. We don't know, until these children come back in, how they've psychologically and how their well-being has been affected. So if we think we're coming back in and starting prepping the reception kids for 6 months of phonics they've missed because they've got an exam coming up the following May, you know, it's got to be slow. It's got to be looking at well-being. It's got to be understanding the needs of the children, because there will be a lot of disclosures when we get back. We've got to appreciate that, irrespective of how many times we're seeing the children dropping off food hampers, seeing them. It's only when that child comes back into school and talks to the stories, then we'll get the full picture and things.
Well, DR says psychological health outweighs physical health as far as we're concerned. Our eldest is really struggling. She misses her friends, her routine, her teacher, and her learning. You're making a really positive sort of like image of going back to school, but as you just said, we don't know what some children are going through. Safeguarding is a massive issue. How are you going to sort of like support children as they come in? It can't be, let's go and have a sit down, because you're probably going to have 20 kids a day saying they want to tell you something. Jonathan?
Yeah, and I think that's why we do want schools to come back, and that's why I think head teachers have been planning since schools closed for schools to come back. I know the teachers have been doing as much pastoral work as they can remotely, kind of bringing up kids. Some of schools have been doing stuff over Zoom, over Skype, over Google Classroom. You know, there's a whole host of stuff, but it is no substitute for actually being in the classroom and being with their peers. And I think that's why we are really keen, because you're absolutely right. It is that balance between physical health and mental health. And I think, obviously, at the height of the crisis, physical health took precedence there, of course, because the virus was a lot more out there. And I think at this stage, obviously, the kind of the mental health side of stuff is starting to come through. And that's why we do want to make sure that schools can gradually open safely. And look, if we get this right, if we get it right with schools, then we can get kids back as soon as possible. I think the danger was if we did too much too soon, if we did kind of everyone back, or even the full 3 years, reception year 1 and year 6, everyone back on June the 1st, there was a risk that we did too much. And then that would mean we'd have to go backwards and kind of bring all the kids back home. And I think that'll be more damaging. The last thing I want to do is to kind of give children a little bit and then have to withdraw it again. That's why I think slow and steady is completely what we need to do. I have to go now. I've got another meeting at 9 o'clock, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Unless there's another, I could probably do another 2 minutes if there's a quick one.
There's a couple. The former head of Ofsted, Sir Michael, You'll have to fill in the gap. I'm sure you know who I'm
To
talking
Michael
about.
something.
So Michael
Langadang.
something. What was that?
Langadang.
Langadang will do. He suggested that pupils go back a year, or pupils redo a year. Is that possible? And what would the benefits be?
Well, let's
I
face
think-
it, when he was actually running Ofsted, he made an absolute disaster of it. So for him to come out the woodwork and, oh yeah, I could be back on telly again spouting nonsense, means that not a lot of people in the education profession will actually listen to him.
I also
But,
think there's not enough space for that, because if you still, if you're holding back everyone back a year, then there's still a new reception coming in. Schools just don't have extra classrooms to do that at all. We've been expanding schools all over Leeds, and we can barely keep up with the population rises as it is. So there wouldn't be room to kind of put a whole nother year in. But I think teachers have got great ways of looking at. Look, exams aren't everything. There are other ways of judging how well children are doing. I mean, that's something we've always thought. And actually, Ofsted are starting to wake up to that. I think for too long, Ofsted have been obsessed with league tables and obsessed with exams. And actually, they're looking more into the development of children is so much more than that. And actually, I hope some of this kind of gives a bit of a refocus to that. But as I say, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to go now.
Thanks very much.
I've given my email out, so please, if you've got anything you want to contact me about, questions that we have not had a chance to get through, or if you've got an individual case for your kids that you want me to look into, I'm more than happy to do that. But yeah, thank you. Good to see you,
Jonathan. See you. Bye-bye.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Just to carry on what the brilliant Councillor Pryor was just saying there, it was interesting. Michael Gove actually said last week when he was pushed in an interview, when asked about the SATs, he said, SATs are not important for children whatsoever. It's just merely an accountability test for primary schools. So, why are we putting all these kids through all this pressure in year 6? My favourite year at school, and I'm older than you young guys, but my time at school, my final year, which was
we're all duffers here, We're all duffers here, Chris.
My final year at school was year 4. It was the best year ever. It was the end of primary school. It was the most beautiful thing. That's changed so much now, because some schools just test, boost, because we're in a league table situation which puts head teachers under pressure to get results. And the love of life, the love of learning, it could be gone. Now, just going back, because I made a note here earlier, when we talk about the work that children have missed out over the last few weeks, I mean, I look nice and healthy now, but as a child, I missed 6 months of school with pneumonia when I was in hospital. I was in school with meningitis when I was 13 for 4 months. I was in school when I was in hospital when I was 12 with appendicitis. So basically, I missed 18 months of my sort of schooling career, and touch wood, I've done okay.
Yeah.
So, but there's, as you can imagine, it's a very different world now. There is a massive emphasis on testing. So, and parents are going to be even more anxious because of this long break. What can they do now?
Well, as I said, it's just carry on doing the learning, because parents are not teachers, as we've said. It's carry on just engaging with the child, following the work which children have set. And if there's people on here whose schools aren't setting any work, if you go to my school website, just put in Google Parklands Leeds, on my website there's a load of what they call coronavirus homework and activities. And not only is the formal writing, reading, spelling lessons and history lessons and things, there's also fun activities of scavenger hunt you can do around your own house, in your garden and things. So there's lots of options if parents are not getting the opportunity from their schools, just to tap into my school website and feel free to use anything you like.
Ron, do you see any more points coming up there?
No, I think we've got most of them.
There's a couple from Karen at the bottom.
At the bottom, let me see. Oh, yes, I see this one. Yeah, Karen Bingham, question for Mr. Dyson. What about if you are struggling to get your kids to do the work they are given? What can I do?
Hello, the lovely Karen. I think that's one of my beautiful parents. Tell them to ring me up at school tomorrow, put them on the phone, I'll get them working. That's the problem, you see, because some people, I've got a 16-year-old upstairs. because he's been good and keeping him out of way tonight and things. He saw his school timetable. He had, he's unmotivated. He's got to learn in school, Whereas I've got a daughter who's, year 7, who in the morning she's logged on at 8:30. She's doing her lessons. She's doing this. So there's some children that are really, really motivated, and there's children that sadly aren't, and they need that school. So again, it's speaking with the child, getting them to find a book that they love reading. Come into my school, Karen, and get yourself some books, that lovely Macaulay can read and things. And it's about just trying to find something that's going to engage them, because, we don't want kids getting up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning because they're playing Xbox till 3, 4, or 5 o'clock in the morning and things. Got to try and keep the routine as strong as we can. And as I said, you speak to school, the high schools, fair play to them, have got people. And I know up at Leeds East, my high school, they're sending messages out weekly saying, if you're struggling with your child at home, give one of our pastoral team a ring, give one of our teachers a ring, and they'll give sort of advice and things. So
Tracy Haig says teachers and children won't be wearing masks. According to the government and LEA, it's not needed. Why are you making such a specific point about PPE, about masks and gloves?
Because the government education advice is you don't need PPE equipment, but you do walking around the supermarket. You do using public transport. So again, there's real mixed messages going around. We heard on a previous Zoom I was on just before, it was about singing can really get these droplets spread out and things, so there's no singing and things. So for me, when you've got education, healthcare children, people in, so I've got a unit on site where some children are still in nappies, some children not deliberately or spit when they're sort of talking and things. So for those children, they need to have masks, they need to have gloves, they need to be safe. My worry though is the government, it's an economic, political decision, not a health decision. And you can't say schools where there's going to be 15 in a bubble all mixing, you don't need PPE equipment, but walking 2 meters behind someone in the supermarket, you do. And it's all those sort of mixed messages. So as I said, I was loving welcoming back my year 6s this Monday, but I've had to delay it for a week because I need the basic plastic gloves. I need some more face masks, and I need, to make sure my staff are protected, because when they go home, they're coming into contact with, say, 4 members of their own family. And if they've got something that passes on and these go somewhere and spread it, this is how that R rate is going to start multiplying out again.
Well, we haven't really talked about the staff. What if staff don't feel comfortable about going in? And what if they have specific healthcare issues? Does that mean they have to go in still?
Well, again, some schools, sadly, will be putting some staff on unpaid leave. Some staff will be going down the disciplinary route. For me, any member of staff that I sent home before lockdown will stay at home. It breaks my heart. I've got my IT technician that has spent the last 10 weeks on a ventilator in Leeds General Infirmary. I've seen the impact if someone gets this. 3 weeks ago, it was touch and go. His wife was told, expect the worst. I've got another member of staff that works with the resource provision unit children who's been in bed for 9 weeks, touch wood, and luckily she didn't have to go to the hospital. So I'm in the trenches every single day. And I can't be dictated to by someone sat in a lovely office in London who doesn't know anything whatsoever about disadvantaged children, what it's like to be disadvantaged, and just dictating to get the economy going. What really upsets me is we went through all the hardship of 10 weeks, total lockdown, and we saw that R rate fall from about 4.2 down to about 0.4. Brilliant. And we've seen that now, and we're trying to follow Donald Trump in America, who, if he had his own way, would never have shut, and we're like, oh, everything's all right now, we're going to open back up. And for me, it's just far too soon. June the 15th, let's reevaluate again. July the 1st, if that track and trace is in place, let's have a fantastic end to July by getting the kids back in. But it's got to be safe. And at the moment, we just don't know what's going to happen, because it's the same government that decided to take the policy on care homes, are taking ill people in hospital, not even testing them, sending them back to the care home. And this government has got blood on their hands from about 20,000, 30,000 people needlessly died that didn't need to die.
I think all of this is going to come back on us very,
Yes.
a lot
Yeah.
sooner than people might think. Jonathan Pryor is not here now, but do you know what the policy is across the city? If you're a teacher and you feel uncomfortable about returning to work, could you could face discipline? Is that correct?
It is. I've suggested to people on Twitter that if you're not comfortable coming back to work, and it might be anxiety, it could be anything, but it's mainly the teachers who've got dependents that they live with or ill children. I've got a member of my staff that the daughter just had a kidney transplant. You know, now according to the letter of the law, this teacher's all right to come back in. How could I live with myself if I made her come to school and she took an infection or something happened to her daughter? It would. I'd never be the same again. I probably wouldn't be able to carry on teaching again. So again, I've been very sceptical of the DfE through this, and thank goodness we've had Leeds. But my staff at my school, I know lots of other schools, if I sent you home pre-lockdown, you stay at home. I don't care if you've got asthma. Well, I do care if you've got asthma, but if they've got asthma, if they've got a pregnant partner, if they're pregnant themselves, if they've got a child or an elderly parent that's got some kind of underlying health issue, I cannot have it on my conscience that I've contributed to something happened to them. So my staff stay at home, and they're not even coded as being absent because they're working at home.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's briefly look at the future. Just give me one quick line on each, because we're pretty much wrapping up. Educationally, how long will it take for children to get back where they were?
I don't think it'll take that long because, as I said, 2015 showed how quickly the children can close that gap. So I think at the grand scheme of things, and I said, with all the time I missed through education as a child, children are resilient, they've got sponges, and more importantly, they're going to want to be back in school. You know.
Okay. What about the well-being? What will pupils need to rebuild their emotional balance and rebuild their boundaries? Because a lot of children may not have any boundaries at this current time.
Again, I think the well-being aspect, the mental health aspect is paramount. Again, I'm looking at my school that I've got 4 sort of learning mentors that can work with children in small group settings and things. But I think it's bigger than that. I think teachers have really got to focus on sort of talking what upset them, what is going to be the future. Because until those children actually come back in as a big group, it's going to be interesting to see what their perspective is. Some of them, we don't know, might come back saying, oh, that was the best 12 weeks ever. I doubt it. You know? But you don't know until these children come in. But one thing that we won't be doing is doing lesson plans for the first 3 weeks, you know, because we've got to do it on a need-by-need sort of basis.
Okay. And there's a lot at stake for parents. Some feel they'll be judged for sending their children for school. Some feel they'll be judged for not. How will parents react to this? And it's quite a serious issue, because you know that glance in the playground can change a parent's sort of opinion of the whole learning environment.
So again, I think the benefit of having Leeds being so proactive is it's the parent's choice. If a parent decides no, not sending them in like I've not, they're not going to get fined. The simple fact is the safest place for these children currently, in the next 4 weeks, it might all change, is at home. And not just going out in big gangs and big groups now that Dominic Cummings has decided that's what we can do and things. It's about being sensible, it's about being safe, you know, and it's,
Many thanks to everyone who's been part of tonight's broadcast. Our focus tonight was on going back to school. How safe is your child going back? Are you concerned about the learning environment, or do you urgently need them to go back to their normal routine? The government wants all pupils in reception year 1 and year 6 to return to their classrooms with no more than 15 pupils in a class. With me tonight was Chris Dyson, the head teacher at Parklands Primary. Give us a wave, Chris. And and Councillor Jonathan Pryor, Executive Member for Learning, Skills and Employment, and he's had to leave us slightly early. And Ron Batiste, a member of Leeds Dads, who has experience in the care and legal fields. And give us a wave, Ron. Thank you. Knowledge empowers, and even when we find out things about the virus, which we might be worrying about, as we understand more, the less concerned we'll be. Don't forget, as well as our AskADad Facebook Live, we have Leeds Dad's Virtual Playhouse for parents and kids on Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Leeds Dad's Quiz Night on WhatsApp Sunday evenings at 8 o'clock. And sounds like a working men's club, doesn't it? Bingos on Saturdays at 8 o'clock. And Leeds Dad's free food parcel service opens tomorrow, Wednesdays. It's all here on facebook.com/Leeds Dads. I'm Erroll Murray from Leeds Dads. You can find more about us if you email us at leedsdads@gmail.com. We'll put some information up from our guest tonight, so you'll find all that on Facebook too. And we hope to be back soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well worthy of the Child Friendly Leeds Award. Brilliant, guys.
Thank you.
And you're still upset about that.